Hello everybody and welcome to the first of two general election debates hosted by Susu TV. With me tonight I have the 7 candidates for Southampton Test constituency. With us we have Nick Chaffee from Tusk, Chris Davis running as an independent candidate, Pearl Hurlingston from the UKIP. Angela Moore wasn't able to be here with us tonight, so we have John Spotswood filling in for her. We have Jeremy Moulton with me and the incumbent Alan Whitehead from the Labour Party. Now, the structure of the two debates will be split into 2 halves. In each half, we'll be asking 4 questions. 3 of these questions will be pre-selected, and then we'll have 1 question from the audience. And this question will be found from our roving reporter, Tom, who's out there somewhere. Tom, are you there?
Yeah, Kash, I'm going to be giving you some live audience reaction here from in the crowd, and I'm going to be getting questions from Twitter as well to make sure we get everything covered here tonight. You can find me in between the 2 sections, where we'll be bringing you all of the live reaction here inside the ground floor. So let's enjoy the debate. It's going to be very exciting.
So remember, if you do want to get involved, use the hashtag VoteSouthampton2015, and Tom might read out some of your tweets. So to begin with, we'll go to an opening statement from each one of our candidates. So we'll start off from Chris.
Do you know, I thought sitting on the end I'd be first. I'm Chris Davis. I'm standing as an independent. I want to kind of start by saying that I've been involved for the last 20 years or so in running food banks across Southampton. And for me, every time that I give away a food parcel, that's a political statement. So I've been kind of involved in this for a while. For me, politics isn't about parties or policies or colours. It's actually about people. And what I want to see is good services, good support. I would like to see the end of an austerity experiment, which quite frankly hasn't worked. I'd like to see a cross-party group within Parliament waging war on poverty and inequality in this country.
Okay, thank you, Nick. We're going to go over to Chris. Then. Oh, Chris, sorry. We're going to go over to Nick now. My bad.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for the invitation here this evening. My name's Nick Chaffee and I'm standing for the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition. We are anti-cuts, 100% anti-cuts, and we do not agree that yourselves here and millions of people around the country should be paying the price for a crisis that was created by the banks and big business. We live in a society today in Britain where the 5 richest people in the country own the same wealth as the poorest 12 million. In Southampton, 1 in 4 children grow up in poverty, supposedly in the soft south, the highest in the whole of the southeast. And it's good to see a lot of young people here, but unfortunately many young people will not be voting in this election. And I think probably it's no wonder when you as students are facing £9,000 a year tuition fees, but MPs have voted themselves a 9%,
thank you, Chris. I have to stop you there.
A 9% pay rise. So if you're opposed to the cuts, I think you know who to support.
Okay, thank
tonight.
you, Nick.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to pass going to Perline, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Perline Hingston, and I'm the UKIP candidate for Southampton Test. Just a bit of background. I was born in Jamaica, and I came to the UK age 11 to join my parents in West Yorkshire because they had gone there to work. During my education, I studied at the University of Leeds, and I taught at the University of Leeds. In 2001, I was recruited by University of Southampton to come and work for them, so that's what brought me to Southampton. I got involved seriously in politics in 2009, felt that UKIP was the party that most matched some of the issues that was concerning me, and in 2010, I was the parliamentary candidate. I'm the parliamentary candidate again this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to throwing over to Adrian from the Liberal Democrats now.
Good evening. My name's Adrian Ford. I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate. I live about a 10-minute walk from here. And I got involved in local politics in the last few years, partly because I wanted to make sure that the Liberal Democrats didn't do the same thing again this time as they did last time, along with my other fellow candidates who were the first time standing. And also because I'm very keen on making sure that public services remain in public hands. I want to make sure that we don't privatise the NHS, and I want to make sure that we support education as much as we can.
Thank you, Adrian. I'm going to be going to John next.
Hi. We and the government that we elect are trustees for the future. And the biggest threat to humanity is humanity, of course. And we have to change things rapidly, and I mean rapidly. We've got global warming coming, we've got nuclear threat, we've got worsening pollution, and we're going to run out of resources. And we know this is happening, and people just sail on regardless anyway. So it's everyone's duty. There's nothing more important than to vote for the Greens to stop that. However, we're also about fairness. We've got policies to cover all areas. We don't like the fact that the rich waste the resources and have far too much, and yet the poor don't even have a living wage. So we're very much a rounded party, as well as being fundamentally based on the Green vision.
Thank you. Next we have Jeremy.
Well, good evening. I'm Jeremy Moulton. I'm the Conservative candidate. I'm a local person. I grew up in Shirley. I came to this university, graduated in 99, and I stood also in the 2010 election. I've been a city councillor for the last 13 years, and my main aim really is to be a good constituency MP for the area where I've grown up and my friends and family and people I know and live. I think also you are electing a government. It's not just about electing your local representative. And I would argue that the economy is on the mend. We're creating 1,000 jobs a day, and we need to stay on that path. And it's only with a strong economy we can have the things that we all want, like the good health service, the good schools, and indeed tackle the problems of poverty in this country.
Thank you very much. And finally, we have Alan Whitehead.
Good evening, I'm Alan Whitehead. I'm the former MP for Southampton Test. I think I win the Live Local contest by living about 4.25 minutes away from here. we got a choice of electing both an MP and with the same vote, the choice of what government we're going to have, and two very different ways of doing things in the government we're going to decide on. Now, I've been the MP for Southampton Test for 18 years. I've got a long track record of fighting for Southampton on issues I care deeply about, like the green economy, renewable and sustainable energy, housing and transport. But it's also about what government we have. Should we elect an MP to be part of business as usual in government, continuing with the miserable prospect for the country I saw set out at the most recent budget of £12 billion more cuts, more austerity, and the likely near destruction of essential public services in the process? Or government balancing the books, doing so fairly with taxes, with action on tax avoidance, on non-dom status and the like, running on side a different way of running our essential services. That's what a Labour government would offer for you over the next 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are your Southampton Test candidates. Now, without further ado, we're going to go straight into the first question. The current debate surrounding higher education centres on tuition fees and student loans. Now, what is your policy towards higher education and research funding? We're going to throw straight to Jeremy, please.
Yeah, I think higher research funding is absolutely critical, and I think a university like Southampton is one of the leading universities in the country for developing new technologies and spin-off businesses. So I think it's something that the government is in the national interest to continue to support the good work that goes on in universities. I think also with increasingly pressure on public finances, as we all know, it is good for the university's finances as well to be able to grow its own technology and industry and create wealth for its own university, which can then be ploughed back into students and their future prospects.
Okay, thank you very much. Alan, do you have anything to say?
Well, I think it is very important that we do at least mention the question of what's happening on tuition fees. Certainly with a Labour government, there would be tuition fees cut from £9,000 to £6,000 a year, plus the prospect of £400 more on grants for those students from less well-off backgrounds coming to university. That would be paid for by reducing the tax on high-rate pensioners' contributions, among other things, in order to make sure that the research and the teaching budgets for universities were not cut because tuition fees had been cut. So those research grants, core grants, would be continued and indeed increased were you to have a new Labour government using that method of funding tuition fee decreases. We need to remember that something like £600 million worth of core research funding has been lost to universities over the last 5 years. That's a very substantial diminution in the ability of certainly our best universities to do the work that is so important to their futures.
Okay,
and that needs to be underpinned for the future.
Okay, cheers. Perline, do you have anything to say?
As I mentioned in my introduction, I have worked in higher education for 30 years. So I think you realise that I'm a big supporter of students and the university sector and all of education. The big plus that UKIP would like to offer students, especially those studying in the science subjects, that's the STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, mathematics and medicine, UKIP is pledging to offer free tuition to those students studying those courses. The reason being that we have massive skills gaps here in the UK, and we're having to recruit people from abroad who are bringing in those expertise. So we would like to have more of our own UK students training in those areas. I personally support all the work that universities are doing in terms of the academic side, all your research, and of course the fantastic international students that come into the university that are such a fantastic addition, both financially and with the mix alongside other students here in the UK.
Cheers. Nick?
Yeah, thanks. I think perhaps some of the issues that haven't been touched on would include the course contact time that a lot of students have now. My understanding from my son is now in his summer term he gets no teaching time whatsoever. It's a term he just spends doing exams, and I think a lot of students now paying £9,000 a year are wondering sometimes what they're actually paying for. So I think more contact with your tutors, more tutorial time, more teaching time should be what university is all about. But I do think it should be free. I don't think any of you here should be paying directly for your education. Society as a whole benefits from what you become, and I think education should be paid from general taxation. And I think in terms of how we deliver and develop education, I think research left in the hands of private industry means education is just a milch cow for industry to make profits from, so we end up pouring research into how we can more efficiently blow people up. Whereas actually what we need is research into renewable energy, into designing a world for the future, and you've got the talent to do that, but you need the funding to make sure that happens. That has to come from public funding, and what that means is that costs of university should come from general taxation, which would mean reversing the tax cuts that have been given to the super rich and to big business, and to ensure you and society in general gets the education that we need.
Thank you, Nick. Chris?
I need to own up to something from the start. The only time I've been to university was for an open day. I agree with Nick. I feel that education needs to be effectively free from nursery up to and including university. I think that, so to revoke tuition fees, I think it's a false economy because the government ain't going to get the money back anyway. The research funding, it seems to me from conversations that I've had that it's very complicated, that it really needs to be simplified, and that the criteria needs to be expanded. That actually there needs to be increased government support for research, because actually, if you think about it, if we get the research right and the development right, actually what we end up doing is building a stronger economy in the longer term. So actually it's by supporting research properly at this stage means that actually we build a much stronger economy going on and enable those jobs and the things that we need.
Okay, thank you very mumuch. Adrian?
Okay, well, I better touch slightly on tuition fees. My own personal view is that the worst problem with them at the moment is that you're paying about 9% of your income. I'd like to see that go down to 5%. I think that would make them much more affordable. But the question wasn't actually about that. So the question about funding research, at the moment, a lot of research is funded from EU grants, and so therefore it is very important that we stay in the European Union to keep that research funding. The Liberal Democrats we would like to see much more research into renewable energy and renewable projects. Partly this could be funded by the Green Investment Bank, which we've already set up, but that also could be funded direct through government, and we would like to carry out a thorough review of funding options to make that possible. We also want to see more part-time degrees for people, because I think we waste talent by not, some people can't get to university full time, and to set up a system where students can move between universities or between courses, rather if they find that they're not on the right track.
Thank you, Adrian. John.
Hopefully most people here know that the Green Party would write off your student tuition debt and would have no tuition fees in the future, because basically we think that's the best investment a country can make is in its education, and we want to make sure it's free, and also obviously it relieves people of having the debt. As soon as they leave university, they're immediately in debt and have problems with mortgage and so on. But about funding, basically we're saying we want to make sure the funding streams are secure and long-term. We will say R&D should be at least 1% of GDP. These are things from our manifesto I'm quoting here. It's important that we have a whole body of research that's not funded by and controlled by large companies. We'll also do things like we'll make sure all public funded research is published openly, and we support the Budapest Open Access Initiative and the Berlin Declaration on Open Access. And I should say, as I was chairman of Hampshire Against Fluoridation, I was absolutely shocked by the quality of research into fluoride, and basically that was because it was done by business, and it was done in poor quality ways, and they didn't publish research which showed all the damage that was done by fluoride.
Okay. I'm going to go straight back to Nick. You mentioned that you wanted to have more course contact hours with tutors. Now, with the Conservatives' previous policy of allowing a maximum fee of 9,000, we saw that many universities went straight at 9,000 and their sort of market system failed. How would you sort of interact with universities to achieve your extended course contact hours?
Well, I think fundamentally it's about resources. So if universities at the moment are being told that the resources are going to come from students, you're the mortgage payers, but the problem is the government put a hole in the bucket and they're draining money out of universities as you're putting money into it. So unless you tackle that issue, you cannot expand the teaching time. Here at Southampton University, 400 admin workers were made redundant. That means that admin work now is done by the lecturers and the tutors. Well, if you actually employed the admin workers to do that support work, your lecturers and tutors would have the free time to teach you. Equally, universities now are using their tutors and lecturers as researchers, again, to finance the university. Put huge pressure on lecturers now to do more research than they are teaching. So again, it depends what we want universities to be, and obviously I would say if they're here to be a form of teaching and education for yourselves, that's where the time and resources should go.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone want to come back on anything mentioned?
Well,
Jeremy.
on the point about competition, you say it's failed as a marketplace. What it has done is it's allowed the cap on university places to be removed. So a lot more people are going to university, and those universities that are out there are competing for those students. So I think in that sense it has been a success. We've got more people, and particularly more people from lower income backgrounds going to university, and that is a good thing. And there's a lot more money in the university sector than there was 5 years ago.
Okay, thank you. A few guys mentioned abolishing university fees or reducing them. Would this affect the cap on university places? Does anyone want to start on that?
I think for a future successful country, you have to have highly educated population, and therefore you need to have a high level of large number of students, and we want to promote lifelong learning as well. So it's really about having a very educated workforce, or a very educated population, and I think therefore you don't put caps on it, but you do have to fund it from various sources we've outlined, and well, I might outline later.
Thanks, John. Anyone else?
I mean, let's be clear what happened when tuition fees went up to £9,000. That was accompanied by an almost complete scrapping of the teaching grant that went to universities and its funding replacement by your tuition fees. And that model simply cannot continue as far as higher education being successful in the future is concerned, not only because it's bad news for students in terms of paying back their tuition fees, but because it looks to set out either a starvation on research funding and teaching money, or further increases in fees. It has to change course, and the 6,000 tuition fee is a starter for that. But
Okay,
it needs to continue to reduce as we get that balance right.
Okay, yeah, we've run out of the questions. Sorry if you guys wanted to talk more about that, but there will be a Q&A at the end, so if you do have any questions, just keep them on you and we'll put them through to the candidate soon. So next we're going to be talking about the NHS. Now, the NHS has formed the centre of much of the discussion today. It's clearly an important issue to many of us, and opinion on the current state is still we're unsure about it. So if any of you could elaborate your policies towards the NHS right now and its future. We'll start off with you, Alan.
Yeah, well, let's be clear, the NHS is in grave crisis. It's overstretched, it is increasingly failing, not because of the fault of the people working within the NHS, but is failing to meet the demands that are placed on it. We saw that, among other things, with the accident and emergency crisis last winter. And on present trends, it looks like becoming in serious difficulties over the immediate next period. And in addition, then, we have a proposal which is in legislation, the Health and Social Care Act, to bring in massive privatisation of the National Health Service over the next few years, with compulsory tendering and any qualified provider being able to essentially cherry-pick parts of the NHS services. My view is that's completely the wrong way to go as far as the future of the NHS is concerned. Labour would repeal the Health and Social Care Act and put instead a preference for an NHS provider in any NHS contracts for the future, and at the same time put £2.5 million in per billion pounds in per year to make sure that the NHS was properly floated.
Yes, we should remember the NHS which is the National Health Service, was established many decades ago. Over time, the population has expanded. We now have what we would describe as an international health service, because there are people coming into the UK who have never paid into the system, but drawing from the system. From UKIP points of view, the new points-based system that we wish to introduce for workers coming into the UK, we would expect people to have with them their own private health insurance to cover them for the first 5 years that they're here in the UK, and will not be able to draw on the National Health Service until after they have paid taxes and worked in this country for 5 years. Everybody in this room knows the pressures that all GPs are under, everybody in accident and emergency, the ward problems and so on.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Nick?
Yeah, I think at the heart of this argument, we're being told there isn't enough money for the health service, and we would reject that argument flatly, that there's enough resources in the British economy to ensure that we have a top-of-the-range health service free at the point of need that provides everything that our communities need. You're here at a teaching hospital at this university where GPs are trained, where nurses are trained, and yet we have a GP and a nurse training shortage. Is that also something that could be addressed by the government? If we had a good training programme for GPs and nurses, then perhaps we wouldn't have the queues at A&E that we presently have. So fundamentally, we would argue that if NHS is a vital service for the public, why should the private sector be invited to come in and make a profit out of your healthcare? So we would argue to reverse all privatisation. It shouldn't even be a question of preference. And the private finance initiative contracts that have been drawn up by previous Labour and Tory governments that will suck £70 billion out of the health service in the next 10 years, the finance companies should be scrapped.
Okay, thank you very much. Chris?
The NHS, in my view, is far too important to be used as a political football. I've got really worried over the last few days. I like watching those auction programmes. And actually what I've kind of heard over the last few days is this kind of auction that's going on. You know, we'll put this much in and we'll put this much in and so on. And I just think the NHS is too important for that. That actually, do you know what, I think it needs to be properly funded. We need more frontline staff, proper support staff, properly trained, properly paid, even if that means, and no other party will say this, even if that means we have to pay a bit extra in tax. Because actually, we need the health service. It is second to none. And it would be, I think it would be a crime if we lost that and it being free at the point. We do need to cut bureaucracy. We do need to cut waste.
I'm going to have to
we
push
do
you.
need to cut duplication, but we need to fund it properly.
Cool. Thank you very much. Adrian.
Oh yeah, well, the NHS has got an internal market which was set up by a previous Labour government. We want to dismantle that. We want to stop, we want to repeal those part of the Health and Social Care Act which say it should be privatised. We want to bring it back into public hands. We want to make sure that the NHS does not, the NHS is run by the public, by the people for the public, not by private industries. We've secured an agreement for TTIP not to affect the NHS, and that no government will have to privatise any public services. So, yes, we're going to put an extra £8 billion in. I agree with Chris that it should be funded properly. I'd also think that once we've done this and we've set it back up as a proper publicly funded public institution, that it remains that way and we all get the hell out and let the doctors and nurses get on with their jobs.
Okay, thank you very much. John.
Well, the Green Party, well, the big danger actually is that we get the two-tier health service, is that we get an overstretched, low-quality public health service, and a lot of people move to a well-funded private health service, and so we actually spend a lot more money on our health. But the other issue is privatisation, which you mentioned, and £18 million a day is going out to private companies for NHS work. And this makes worse training, it makes worse working conditions, and it makes the focus all on profit and not on people. So people are working out ways of making a better profit out of it and not on how to treat people better. Obviously, we keep this health service free and also have free social care for the elderly. If the Scots can do it, why can't we? Now, we also support local community health centres to help break the problems with A&E and with GPs. And what more we got? Well, we've basically said we need people to help people to help themselves, and we'll end the phony patient choice, because it's not really what you really need is your own local health system to be able to deal with your needs and not to try and sort of choose between two different options, which is not realistic in the NHS.
Thank you very much, John. Okay, does anyone want to start off the debate? Okay, Jeremy.
So the NHS is the Conservatives' #1 spending priority, and at the last election we said that we would increase it in real terms every year. Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling said that was irresponsible, but actually we've put nearly £13 billion extra into the NHS, so that's £12.9 billion per annum now, over and above what it was in 2010, and we have committed to the extra £8 billion by the end of the next Parliament. And you do need to put more money into the NHS because we have an ageing population, and that £8 billion is just to meet the demand from demographic change. But we do also need to reform how we do the NHS, because you can't throw endless money at it. There will never be enough. And that means we need to refocus on preventative services. We need to focus on primary care services. And as an example, Southampton is benefiting from 6 new surgeries, or 6 extended hour surgeries operating 7 days a week, 8 till 8, which will mean people don't have to go to A&E if they've got a problem that actually the GP would help with. And the Better Care Fund is also essential. That is billions of pounds, £5 billion nationally, which is going into pooling the budgets of social care and the NHS. So that, because they're all interlinked, if someone falls over and breaks their hip, it is then a cost to the health service. So if we can do things to prevent these things happening in the first place, then it saves everyone money. So we need to be smarter about how we deliver things.
Okay, I'm going to go back to Perline. When you made your opening comments, because the A&E has been a quite prevalent issue in the media, do you have any views on that at all?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the
A&E waiting times.
Right.
Do you have any views on that? Because I didn't remember you saying any.
Well, the time is so short. Perhaps, trying to get all my points in, that's quite difficult. So apologies to the chairman if he feels I'm not picking up on all the points. Yes, of course, it's horrendous that currently, as you know, ambulances have this fast target time which they're expected to achieve. Ambulances are parked outside A&E departments waiting to offload patients, but there are no beds and staff inside A&E to deal with those patients. So, it carries on that the ambulances keep missing their targets.
Okay, thank you very much, Perline.
If I could perhaps raise a couple of points. I think politicians don't have great reputations, and perhaps quite rightly, because they make promises at elections that they don't go on to keep. And I think if you want to judge the Tories in terms of what they've done to the health service, don't fall for promises, judge them on what they've done in the last 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick.
Can I just make this point, that health workers have had their pay cut by 9% in the last 5 years. That's why we have a retention crisis in the NHS of GPs and of teaching staff. And in primary care, the reason why we have a crisis at A&E is because the Tories have cut primary care. So they've closed walk-in centres in Southampton, they've closed care homes in the city.
Okay,
so we now have nowhere else to go. So judge people on what they do, not what they say.
We're going over to Tom now, who's going to be going through the audience and finding a question for me. Tom.
So we're both half of this. We're going to be getting an audience question that we've got pre-prepared here from Garden Talk. So I'm going to this gentleman here in the pink shirts, and we've got a question on employment. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Good evening, panel. I'm Edward Gillams. As students, we're looking forward to starting our working lives. Do any of your parties have a provable track record to rely on of creating new employment?
Okay, so this is regarding creating new employment for students, and as the current representative of the Conservatives are in power now, do you have anything to say?
So creating jobs and prospects for students. Well, we've created over the past 5 years 2 million extra jobs. That's a rate of 1,000 jobs a day, and that figure is still growing. And it's not just jobs. We've had 2.2 million new apprenticeships. So I would say the prospects actually of a growing economy are very bright for people leaving university these days, and I think we do want to stay on that track. And if we have a strong economy, if we have competitive taxes for business, and we're bringing companies into this country, then we will have a strong future. If we don't, if we go back to the old ways of spending too much money, borrowing too much money, driving business offshore, then the prospects for our graduates of the future, I think, will be sadly very bleak.
Okay, does anyone else want to answer the gentleman's question? Yeah? Yeah, we'll go over to Chris first.
I keep on hearing about 2 million jobs having been created and 1,000 a week and so on. Can I just say that the evidence that I see in food banks is that our numbers in the summer of last year were rising at 44% year on year. That last year we fed people 9,500 times in Southampton alone. And that my concern is that we are seeing an ever-increasing number of people come into food banks who are in work, these new jobs, many of them part-time, many of them low-paid, most of them service industry and lots of 0 hours contracts. What we're able to do in an organisation like ours is to provide something that's really valuable. And that is volunteer work, because actually what we're enabling people to do
Chris, I'm going to push you for a point.
is to prepare for work and be able to give them a reference, most valuable piece of paper they can have.
Okay, thank you very much. I remember John and Adrian. John, do you want to go first?
Yeah. I'll just say I'm getting a bit fed up with the Tory line about how marvellous the economy is. I mean, they're doing cuts after cuts, and it's just, yeah.
Thank you, John.
I should say a bit more about creating jobs as well. But actually, the main the growth in the economy has actually come totally from more immigration, interestingly. Anyway, what we would do in the Green Party is we invest a lot in renewable energy and in insulating homes and actually creating jobs in the short run, actually saving money in the longer term and actually be able to invest in other things. And we're also doing it with a living wage, so everyone gets a minimum of £10 an hour by 2020.
Okay, thank you very much. Adrian.
Okay, we do want to balance the books, but we don't want to do it the same way as the Conservatives want to do it. We want to make sure that we don't cut a lot more jobs out of the system. Yes, we know we've got to save a bit of money, but you can also raise money. We're not afraid of clamping down on large companies with their corporation taxes and tax avoidance schemes in order to fund that. And then once that's done, we then want to invest money. We don't want to keep going in one direction. We want to go back the other way. So we want to invest in research, we want to invest in renewable energy, and we want to make sure that this country becomes the leading force in renewable energy to create more high-tech jobs, which is where you will go to from here. And that in turn will create other jobs for other people. So it's all about investment in the future. So as soon as we turn that corner, we want to go in the other direction.
Okay, so that's a focus on renewable jobs there as well. Does anyone else want to come in? Alan?
One thing we need to remember about the so-called increase in jobs over the last period by this government is the enormous rise in zero-hour contracts and the extent to which a good proportion of those jobs are jobs where actually you have very little security, you have no more than the possibility of work at times, with all that means. 1.3 million zero-hours contracts now. So the first point, I think, is that new jobs need to be real new jobs, proper new jobs, and certainly Labour would outlaw zero-hours contracts as far as jobs where you're working for one employer are concerned. And secondly, the prospect of investing in a large number of jobs in the sunrise economy, not in the sunset economy. That is green jobs in the new high-tech, low-carbon economy, which would go alongside the investments that Labour would be proposing in that area.
Thank you.
I think that would make an important contribution.
Pauline, do you want to come in?
Yes, with regard to graduate jobs, the decision you need to make, and you can make here at this election, is whether you wish to compete with against 50 other graduates in the UK or with hundreds of other graduates from the rest of Europe.
Okay, Nick.
Yeah, cheers. I think, again, a lot of politicians like to make a lot of promises. As a trade unionist, I've been active in recent years and in the last 20 years, standing on picket lines and during demonstrations of workers who've been threatened with unemployment, job cuts and the closure of industry. So in Southampton now, we've lost industry like the Ford's Transit Plant, Vosper's Shipyard. And what we have to do if we're going to return and redevelop industry and employ engineers and scientists for the future, then we have to invest. And what's clear in this economy, in a worldwide economic crisis for capitalism, is that big business does not invest. It has no confidence in making profits. And so what we need, we would argue as socialists, is public investment in industry that would really see the development of talent and the development of jobs for all in the society. And I would just perhaps make a couple of quick points as well. Why are some people working 60, 70 hours a week? Why can't we actually reduce the working week and share out the work? Why are some people working in their late 60s and early 70s? Why don't we reduce the retirement age to create jobs? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to come back on a point Pauline made, because I noticed a bit of unrest. You mentioned that you didn't want students from the UK universities competing with immigrants.
No, that's not what I said. I think students will need to choose. When you graduate after spending 3 or 4 years doing your degrees, what would you prefer? To be able to compete with other UK graduates? Or are you happy to have an open Europe where you are competing with 3,000, however many other graduates for one job? So, that is your decision, really.
Alan,
so,
do you want to weigh in on this?
Well, I mean, yes, it's a two-way process, isn't it? I mean, the question of... The question of free movement of labour in Europe means that actually part of the competition process is also for graduates to be able to compete for jobs in the rest of Europe as well. And the idea of closing our borders so that you have competing in a little island, by the way, I guess with another 1 million UK expatriates being repatriated back to the UK to compete for the rest of the jobs that are only available in the UK as well, seems to be quite a bizarre proposition, I think.
Okay, does anyone else want to come in on this? Okay, Jeremy.
Yeah, I'll just come back. Alan said so-called jobs, like you're pretending they don't exist. I mean, these are 2 million extra jobs where people are now taking home a pay packet than they weren't before. I think we should celebrate that, and I think we should be proud of the achievement, and it's because we've made the right decisions for the economy. But I just want to come back on Nick's point about the idea that if you lower the retirement age, that gives everyone else more of a chance to get a job. I mean, that is just economic nonsense.
Okay, I'm going to have to
the reality is,
point,
if you
Jeremy.
create more jobs, That creates more wealth, which in turn creates jobs, so everyone benefits.
But how do you create wealth?
Sorry, Nick, I'm going to have to end this one here.
If people in general are on poverty wages, and as Alan says, 0-hour contracts and poverty pay is the norm for all these new jobs, what wealth does that create? Profits for the super rich?
Yeah, we won't be addressing that yet, but we can just address these at the end. If you just want to make a note of them, you can talk about that all you want. Okay, the final question of this half is going to be regarding local transport. Now, for students, local and national transport links are important because they're going to be moving between cities quite a lot. So, yeah, what would you do, if elected, to improve the local transport links? We'll start off with you, Pauline.
I must say, with regard to the local transport in Southampton, the Unilink bus is excellent, and I know that a lot of students use cycling and so on. Now, of course, we've heard said by so many people over decades that what we ought to be doing is have proper cycle lanes, similar to places like Holland, for example, to make cycling a lot safer for people. Those of you who use cycles often, hopefully you have some thoughts on that. In general, within the UK, as you know, the train service, that was all broken up some time ago, with all different companies competing for the different lines and so on. I must admit I don't use the trains that often, but those of you who do, perhaps you know how difficult it might be to...
Thank you very much. And Nick.
Yeah, our campaign has been supported by the rail union, the RMT, and it's their policy and our policy to campaign for public transport, publicly owned transport, and for the renationalisation of the railways. Jeremy's vision of the free market system delivering what we need has completely failed when it comes to public transport. We have a system of corporate welfare where private rail companies, private bus companies take public money, stuff their shareholders with huge profits and deliver a lousy service that's extremely expensive and most people can't afford. So why don't we do what we do with a health service, from general taxation, fund a public transport system that actually works, a bus to the train, a train to where you want to go to, that's affordable, that everybody can use, and then we hugely reduce the amount of cars that are on the road. So there is a solution to all these problems,
Thank you very much,
but not on the basis of the current system we have.
Thanks. Chris.
I think we need better integrated bus and rail systems. I do think that there needs to be a real look at the cost of public transport. Quite frankly, it's cheaper for me to drive my car to London and find somewhere to park it than it is to go by train. And so I'm going to choose to go by car because it's more convenient. So I think if we could get public transport costs down, that would help. I think as well there needs to be some simplification about rail fares in particular, and some assurance that when you book online and such like that, you're getting the fairest deal. And I just wonder whether there needs to be locally a discussion, a group that comes together from students and from public and so on to have a look at what the needs are for public transport in and around Southampton, what needs there are for cycle routes and better signage and all of those things, but actually to sit down and work out a better system for the city.
Thank you very much, Chris. Adrian.
I'd like to see more joined up cycle routes. They tend to start in nowhere and end in nowhere. As a cyclist, I find that a bit annoying. I'd like to see one bus ticket for... I know you've got one bus ticket for Unilink, but I'd like you to be able to use that bus pass on City Bus as well, for all buses, not just for one bus company. We're going to introduce a 2/3 off bus pass for 16 to 21-year-olds, so that's good news. We'd like to see more investment in railways, electrification of railways, and also public transport systems locally, like more tram systems, integrated transport locally, encourage local councils to take part in those sort of schemes and bring up more things like you've got trams in Edinburgh, you've got trams in Manchester, which are excellent systems. We'd like to see something like that in Southampton, and that's something that we would support.
Okay, thank you. John.
Well, since 2010, rail fares have shot up by 25%, while real wages have fallen. And in Europe, their public railways are cheaper for passengers. And for instance, a ticket from London to Bristol costs you about £100, is more than 3 times the French equivalent. So basically, we would bring the railways back into public ownership, which actually saves money and improves services. We would immediately cut the fares by 10%. And we would also obviously deal with things like walking and cycling. We said 10% of transport spending needs to be on walking and cycling, which sort of ensures that we have a decent investment in that, which we don't at the moment. We would reallocate the £30 billion for road building to invest in public transport and also cycling and walking systems. What else we'd do? We'd also put road user tolls for heavy lorries and try and, in a wider sense, localise the economy so we don't have so much transport on the roads. And we'd also put taxation on aviation, which isn't taxed. The aviation fuel isn't taxed at the moment. And we need an international agreement on that, but we would
Thank you very much. Jeremy.
Well, on the point of shareholders and bus companies, a shareholder isn't a dirty word. I mean, anyone that wants to pay into a pension to have a secure retirement is indirectly going to be a shareholder in the future. I think we should remember that. I think the idea that the City Council taking over the Unilink bus service is going to make it better, I think is also fantasy. There's lots we can do to improve transport. I think, talk about investment, we obviously do need to do more with cycle routes. I think a lot of the cycle routes are full of potholes, so they should be prioritised for resurfacing. I think we need to have integrated transport. We need a Southampton Oyster card. There's going to be a lot of investment in the train network in the next few years, and I think Southampton needs its fair share of that because it is a central link up to on the Waterloo line. I think we need more money to get the traffic coming into the docks off the roads so we can free up our roads because we're getting very congested. But I think probably the key thing that we need to do is we just need to change people's habits. And we can all spend lots of money, but actually I think, take cycling, the thing that certainly made the biggest difference to many people was the Olympics. So I think if you can actually nudge people into making better decisions, you actually achieve a good result.
Thank you. Alan.
Yeah, the actual question, I thought, was about what about transport in local communities and cities? And the fact of the matter is, important though the rail networks are, and indeed Labour would want to put some serious changes into how the national rail networks work, only 7% of anybody in the country, 7% of the population actually ever goes on a train journey. In cities, overwhelmingly, it's about buses, it's about cycling, it's about pedestrian access, and a bit more about buses. Now, as far as Southampton is concerned, at the moment, with the present arrangement for bus services, where they are regulated route by route by route, you've actually got the 3 routes oversubscribed, the rest of the city hardly having any buses at all. What we need to do is have local communities being able to franchise services across a whole city and stick people to those franchises and make them work for the whole area.
Yeah, Jeremy mentioned how he wants to keep bus services private, I'm right?
Well, I don't think anyone's apart from Tusk.
And you wanted to create an integrated service where one bus could be used for all of them. I mean, does anyone else have any ideas on how this might not work? A private bus system with, an integrated bus pass.
Well, yeah. I mean, we've got the situation on the railways again, but where you get on the train and if you can't go certain routes without paying a separate fee. So I've been sitting on the train recently going up to Basingstoke, and people have been told they shouldn't be on that train because that's going up to Reading instead. They should be on the London one, so they have to buy another ticket. Anyway, so it's not very integrated between these private companies. And I remember back before a sort of deregulation, we actually had an integrated bus service that didn't have too many buses in busy areas and not enough buses in the countryside.
I'm going to have to push you, John.
Yeah, so basically we would regulate the bus services.
There is an alternative which I've put forward actually to my own party. If you take charge of the fares, so you could do this on railways, you do it on buses. So in railways it would be Network Rail, in buses it could be local council, will take charge of the fares, take charge of the routes, decide where the buses are going to go. You could, if you then wanted to involve private industry, contract people to provide a specific service. So it is possible to integrate services by as long as you're in charge of the actual where the services are going to go, where the fares are going to be, and then you could either run those services yourself, contract them yourself, or whatever you wanted to do.
I'm going to have to end that there, Adrian. And that was the first half of the general election debate from host Susi TV. We're going to have a little break while Tom walks around and talks to you guys and just gets general opinion. Thank you very much.
Hello, so I'm here in Garden Court giving you coverage of the audience reaction here at our hustings at Southampton University Students' Union. So we're going to do some of the tweets that we've been getting in so far. all of you at home are very interested in seeing what's going on and what each of the politicians has to say. In the meantime, I'm going to get Toby in. Toby, come on in. This is Toby Levison. He is from Surge Radio. Toby, you're doing some coverage behind the scenes. So how is that going, and how are you finding tonight's proceedings?
Yeah, we're having lots of fun. We're live on surgeradio.co.uk. We're on the second stream. We're broadcasting some of Kash's debating skills, and we're also taking the mickey out of the candidates and our kind of satirical swipe at tonight's action.
So we could say that us here at Susa TV are being quite serious, which is nice, but you guys are providing, what I've heard, quotes, the Graham Norton-esque kind of commentary.
Yeah, we're not being serious at all. But we're having lots of fun, so if you would like something perhaps more interesting, I mean, the debate on transport was lively. And by lively, it looked like most of them were falling asleep. But everyone at Susa TV is doing a great job. If you want something different, you can go and listen to us on Surge Radio.
Okay, thank you very much, Toby. So yeah, as I said, people are very interested in what's going on here on Twitter. So far we've covered the NHS, we've covered employment, transport too. NFK Adam has tweeted, more jobs is one thing, but more high quality jobs and fewer people working in poverty is another. Remember, you can tweet us with the hashtag VoteSotten2015, and remember that all the tweets will potentially be asked to our candidates on the stage behind me. Someone stated that obviously with the latest findings stating that over 1 million people used food banks in the last financial year, many people on Twitter are asking if that issue is going to get tackled tonight. So that's something that we will see hopefully later on. And obviously John Spottiswoode of the Green Party, worth a mention, drew the first round of applause of the afternoon, which is very surprising. So I'm going to go and find some audience members that are willing to chat to me. Other guys, can I have you for a chat for a second to go on TV? So, how are you finding the elections, obviously the debate so far tonight?
It's really quite frustrating. Particularly
it's politics, isn't it? How are you finding it?
It was lovely to be able to ask a question, a real privilege. I'm very pleased with the Liberals, who gave a good answer about technology, which is something that's important for us. And I'm also very pleased with Jeremy. It's a shame that Labour bang on about the 0 hours jobs, especially when today, or when it was yesterday, Labour-controlled Lancashire Council offered some adverts for new 0 hours contracts.
The member from the TUSC, were you saying, yeah?
In answer to my question as to whether he had proof of creating jobs, he explained how picket lines led to forward closing their plant.
It'd be interesting to see what you two think about this. So someone's obviously, we're just talking about employment. Someone has tweeted saying that more jobs is one thing, but more high quality jobs and fewer people working in poverty is another. Do you feel like that's something they need to tackle? Do you think they've even touched on that yet?
I absolutely think it's something the Coalition are tackling. Wages are now starting to go up. We have been through a hell of a tough time over the last 5 years, but we are starting to head in the right direction, and it's only by sticking with the plan that's working that we're going to get those better paid jobs and that more job security. It is something that's coming. We need to stick with the plan that's working.
I see you're repping the T-shirt, which is very nice. So obviously, Tory supporter.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as I'm concerned, they're the only way to get the country back on track. At the moment, we have had a huge global recession, but all the countries are commenting on how well England is doing and the UK, and we are doing far better. We are getting far better than a lot of other countries. I think if we continue to do that, we'll have the best economy, we'll have the best jobs.
Something we're just asking tonight is, are you going to be voting here or are you voting in another constituency? Is that the constituency you're voting in?
Yes, voting for Jeremy.
And so at the moment we're voting for Jeremy, not going to change at all, no? Very much doubt it. So I'm going to leave you two. We might chat to you later on in the debate. Thank you for chatting to us here on Susa TV. So as I said, we are here at our debates here in Garden Court. And so I'm going to go and try and find some more audience reaction. Potentially this time, less of a Tory support with the T-shirt. Let's find a bit of a mix here in Garden Court. So I'm going to be heading over this way into you might be able to see me on many of the cameras. I'm going to be waving the iPad about. So I'm going to work my way in here to this table. So, guys, you mind coming on for a chat? Anyone mind coming on TV for a chat? No one. Gonna come for a chat, come on. Come on CCTV. So, how are you finding the debate so far?
It's been really interesting. It was the best part probably when it got a little bit heated. Discussions, but it's been really interesting and quite informative as well. And it's been really nice to sort of get to know all the candidates, not just sort of the ones who put the one in
yeah, that's one thing, getting leaflets for a door. You see their picture obviously on the leaflet, but this is something different, seeing them in person and seeing how they react to questions, I guess.
It makes it a lot more real and it makes the elections much closer to home. Because elections online for the whole country, but ultimately a lot of policies that they have as a party won't affect a lot of these people who canvassing, campaigning.
Who, before now, had you decided on who you were going to be voting for?
I had a very good idea. I'm not going to say who it is.
So who it is, but is that changing, being in here and listening to some of the candidates talk? Because is this the constituency you're going to be voting in?
It is the constituency I'm voting in. If I'm honest, I've got a lot more respect for the other candidates, especially one or two in particular now, but I don't really know.
You want to say who they are?
I'm not going to say who they are, unfortunately, but
We've got a closet voter here, so we're going to keep that under wraps. All right, thank you for chatting to us. So, yeah, I'm here in Garden Court. We've obviously had the debate. We've got an independent MP. We've got the Lib Dems, we've got Green, we've got Kash, our chair, in the middle of all of them, and then we've got the Conservatives, Labour, UKIP and the TUSC here lined up. So we're going to be getting your tweets throughout the afternoon. So remember, you can tweet us with the hashtag VoteSutton2015. So going back to Twitter, we've had quite a few things going on. So obviously I mentioned about John Spottiswoode earlier, drawing the best reaction from the crowd so far of the Green Party. But also Elliot Smith has tweeted, which is something that he hopes will come up later on. Refreshments, people are getting refreshments as they walk past, go figure. So Elliot Smith has tweeted saying, as millions of people are getting their wages topped up by the taxpayer via in-work benefits, do you support a living wage? So I'm going to be heading up back this way. We're heading back. So remember, I'm going to be getting an analysis throughout the afternoon here and at the end of the debate. And remember, you can tweet us with the hashtag, as I mentioned earlier on. I'm going to be walking this way through the crowd. Excuse me, excuse me. Right, I'm going to be going over to Alex. Alex, my friend, we're live on Susu TV. Right, I'm going to sit here and chat to you. So, what are you doing throughout the night? Alex, well, you've got a blog going on. What is the URL for the blog so I can tell people? It is 24liveblog.com, and you can search on there the Southampton Test constituency general election debate. So Alex is going to be tweeting through that. It's kind of your commentary that you're putting on. Okay. Well, Alex, I'm going to leave you to it. Alex, obviously, doing a live blog here from Garden Court for us. So it's going to be very exciting. I don't know how long until we are going back on stage. Very, very shortly. The candidates are getting refreshments, and the people here are getting refreshments. There's a bit of a delay, so we'll be going back to the stage very shortly with our chair, Kash, Singh. So I'm going to try and find some people who want to chat. Who might want to chat? Let's head over this way. Are you guys willing to chat on TV about how you think it's going so far? So how do you feel so far that the debate's going? Is it kind of swayed any opinion in any certain way?
UKIP have performed quite badly. That's kind of what I thought before anyway, but it's just reinforced that all polling has done is highlight the issues that already exist and not somehow UKIP will perform in any way. I think John on the Green Party has performed very well, surprised me.
Drew the biggest applause so far, didn't he, so far this evening? Is that any surprise to you at all or not?
I'm surprised actually that how many people put this behind him. I thought it would be as popular, but he has done really well, so I'm surprised I'm seeing him.
What do you think about the debates tonight? How do you think they're going?
It's going okay. It's a little bit bitchy. I don't have much time.
Any questions you want to see tackled? Any particular topics that you want to see be brought up that haven't been brought up so far?
Some more social issues like benefit sanctions and so on, which are causing lots of people.
Do you think, what is there anything that so far that you want to be brought up that hasn't been so far? Anything in particular about the NHS you feel that they need to cover specifically?
I want to know, they were talking briefly, but no one's really said what exactly they're going to do to tackle problems.
Save your questions, guys, because the Q&A is coming up straight after this, and you'll be able to pop your hand up and ask some pretty crucial questions. Thank you for chatting to us today. Hopefully the rest of the debate's all right for you. So yeah, we're live on CCTV still here at Garden Court. So I'm going to be heading back through in the crowd this way because the candidates aren't yet back on stage. I don't know why they're not on stage yet, which is kind of surprising. Let me head this way. Let me see if there's anyone else that's willing to have a chat. Are you willing to have a chat for us? So, how do you feel the debate so far is going?
They're all saying pretty much the same thing, really. They're all just spouting different numbers. It's not like anyone really standing.
Statistics get a bit lost when they're chatting about. Are you surprised that John Cotteswell of the Green Party drew the biggest applause of the night so far? He's doing very well standing in for Angela, who I've been told is ill, so she's not here. But coming to the debate beforehand, did you have an opinion or a candidate in mind that you were going to be voting for, and has that changed now? Whitehead from Labour has been in this seat since 1997, so that's a long time. So you can see why he's. Do you agree with the fact that he's been here for so long? Can you see the qualities that obviously this constituency like about him? One topic that you would like to see be tackled tonight in the debate, what would that be that hasn't already been said?
Yes, I mean, I don't well to see
that. On Twitter with that is that are we more bothered about the tuition fees as students, or are we more bothered about the maintenance loans? What do you think?
Yes, I've really dug into my wardrobe.
You need to get a bit of yellow in there, like a yellow sash or something. Well, you're not just purple.
With tuition fees, obviously, the parties are all planning different things and putting forward different plans. Is there a particular house? Obviously, the Green Party, they plan to ultimately introduce it. Labour want to reduce it down. So, what do you agree? Do you obviously agree with no tuition fees at all? Is that what you think?
I do think that, yeah.
How are you finding things? Are you tired or are you soldiering on? I'm
If you've got any questions, be sure to save them for the Q&A later on, okay? But thank you very much for chatting to us. So, obviously, I've just got some audience reaction as the debates are going on here in Garden Court.
Hiya. Welcome back to the first of the two general election debates hosted by CCTV. Remember, if you want to get in touch, use the hashtag VoteSouthampton2015. And unfortunately, Nick had to leave due to this debate clashing with another meeting, so we won't be having him for the second half. And we're going to go straight into the first question of the second half, which is regarding education up till the age of 18. Now, education up till the age of 18 will be soon made compulsory, according to law, and there is also reports of vast shortages in education places amongst young people. So what are your party's policies on this issue? Conservatives, Jeremy?
Well, I mean, it's a requirement by law to provide school places, so we will need to provide good school places for all our children, however many of them there are. So the education budget is always therefore going to be protected and favoured, I think, by any government. I mean, if we can go back to the issue of the tuition fees, I think that the government did take a strategic decision in 2010, and that was to say that investment, the bulk of the new investment should go into the younger children at the primary age. And the reason being is your life chances are determined at that young age, far more so than when you get to, say, 18. And actually, if you invest in those early years, you actually do create much more opportunities for people. And that's why things like the pupil premium, which has benefited a huge number of Southampton children, as we do have the problems of poverty and deprivation in the city, I think has been such a good thing for Southampton.
Okay, thank you. Adrian.
Okay, well, the Liberal Democrats want to protect the budget in real terms for education from 2 to 19. We also want to protect investment in STEM subjects, introduce a Royal College of Teachers, make sure everybody's taught by a qualified teacher, free school meals for children, all primary school children, keep faith schools, and want to give 16-year-olds the vote. Basically, what we really want to do is to make sure that education is a priority in the next government, and to make sure that everybody is entitled to a top-class education, so that everybody comes out at the end of that time properly educated and able to take their place in society.
Okay, John.
We would like, well, there's got several things. These I'm quoting from a manifesto, by the way. I should just say before I start that the reason Angela couldn't be here, actually, she's actually very ill. So I'm standing, and I'm Southampton Itchen candidate, but she gives her apologies. Anyway, on the education side of things, we'd bring academies and free schools back into the local authority system. We would scrap Ofsted, which a lot of teachers like. We would have class size, aim for class size of about 20, and all teachers would have qualified teacher status. We would not have compulsory school until 7, as in line with a lot of European countries who do very well out of that system. No publicly funded school should be run by a religious organisation. Private schools would have their charity status removed. We'd encourage evening youth schools, because a lot of people sort of drop out of school, but actually if you can encourage them to come back in the evenings and actually make it a social thing, that could be very good. We'll invest the necessary money to cope with the growing numbers of children. And we'd also we'd make sure, with 50% of the teaching people leaving in the first 5 years of teaching, we must make sure that their workloads are compatible with the European legislation. My wife's a teacher, and it's certainly not that at the moment.
Cheers. Pearline.
Those of you who are local to Southampton may be aware that recently we've had an issue of primary school children having to find places in schools local to them. Last week I was talking to some parents who are absolutely incensed that their child couldn't get into the primary school nearest to their home, and some of the siblings are at different schools. So that causes a lot of stress for parents, where they have to commute to different schools, in the morning and the evening, etc., to collect the children. Now, coming on to UKIP policy, we would want to broaden the education system and make all bright children actually reach their full potential. We would wish to bring back grammar schools. We wish to negate these teachers' performance-related pay, because we think that causes teachers a lot of stress.
Thank you very much, Pearline. Next up, we'll be going to the Labour Party. Aaron.
Yes, of course the education budget should be protected, and we'd want it to rise in line with inflation each year over the next period. But there are a number of very basic things in the education system it seems to me we've got to put right. For example, the balmy free schools experiment that has been conducted by the present government, putting £241 million on spending on free schools in areas with enough provision already. And not only that, but putting into those schools teachers who are not qualified. We have to have a very basic point that if we are to have a decent education system, teachers who are teaching in state schools must be qualified, and that is what we will do over the next period. We need to reduce class sizes for those people setting out in their school careers. 5, 6, 7-year-olds are almost 100,000 children at the moment in class sizes of over 30 across the country. And finally, at the other end, we need to make sure there is a particular qualification for technical education in 16 to 18-year-old colleges as an option.
I wonder how it was that we didn't spot the shortage of places in schools coming. We had 5 years' notice from the time the child was born. We should have seen this coming. And 12 years ago, I was a governor in a school. And back then, we were talking about there were too many places, and so we were closing schools. And here we are 12 years later, and we haven't got enough places. So I just think there's a bit of bad planning there. I do think that we've got an education system at the moment that's a little bit unfair in that, and I say this with respect to every single person in this room, but actually we have an education system that sets an awful lot of us who are not academic up to fail. I do think there needs to be more emphasis on vocational training and movement towards apprenticeships for those of us who are not going to get to university. Yeah? So I think that needs to be done. I think there needs to be more emphasis on adult training to enable those who've coming out of the system illiterate and needing that help. And let's concentrate in those years that kids are in schools Let's concentrate on teaching the kids and less on testing the kids.
Thank you, Chris.
And please, politicians, stop meddling, let the teachers teach.
Okay. I noticed you brought up a point of an emphasis on vocational training for children. Do any of you, other candidates, have anything to say on that?
Yeah, I was mentioning the technical baccalaureate that Labour wants to introduce for 16 to 18-year-old students who are particularly looking for technical education. Indeed, as Chris has mentioned, may well not be going to university and may well be entering the world of work through apprenticeships subsequently. So I think it's really important that that technical baccalaureate, for example, is run through present colleges of further education, which could go into institutes of technical education and provide that element of education leading to those different routes, vocational routes, which are equally important to going into higher education.
Just on the issue of technical training, I mean, we do have a studio school now in Southampton. That was something I was very pleased to support when I was responsible for children's services and education on the City Council, and that is for children who are 14 plus, and they are children that perhaps want to go early on down that more technical vocational route. And prior to that, we didn't have that option in Southampton. I think the more choice, the more variety we have in the education sector, the better.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Does anyone else want to add in on this? Adrian?
Can I just say on UKIP? Yes. UKIP certainly supports specialist vocational and technical colleges and schools, and definitely apprenticeships.
Okay, thank you, Bowie. I'm just going to have to throw it to Adrian now, just quickly.
I think I mean, we've created 2 million apprenticeships in this last Parliament. I think we need to carry on doing that. I agree with Chris that it isn't just about people going forward to university.
Okay,
I didn't go to university when I left school, so I do think that it's very important to have that vocational option as well.
Thank you, Adrian. Now we're going to be going...
Just quickly say that I'm in favour of apple pie and homemade apple pie and apprenticeships as well.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to be going over to the audience. Tom, where are you?
Well, this time the question isn't from the audience. We've been talking to the audience and they've been saying this as well. On Twitter, the question is, with the latest findings this week stating that there have been over 1 million cases of people using a food bank during the last year, how do any of the parties plan on tackling this? Okay,
we're going to go to our food bank expert, Chris.
I've worked for the last 20 years or so trying to close our food bank. But actually what we found is that the need is increasing. I think there are a number of things that we can do to start to do some work. One of the things that we need to do, I think, is to increase the minimum wage. That would encourage people back to work. The other thing it does is it would bring people back into paying tax. I don't think people want to be so poor that they can't pay tax. Actually what people want is to earn enough so that they can pay their way. And so I do that. I think that what we've noticed is that every time there's been a change in the benefit system over the last 5 years, that numbers in food banks have gone up. When crisis loans stopped, the numbers went up. When bedroom tax came in, numbers went up. Every single time there's been a change. And now we've got universal credit. The idea is great, but the implementation is absolutely dreadful and is only going to cause more. So actually where we're going at the moment is not getting rid of food banks and cutting that number down. Actually what we're going to see is the number of people depending on food banks to rise.
Thank you, Chris. Does anyone else want to weigh in on this?
Yes, please.
Yeah, we go to Adrian then, John.
I would agree with Chris that actually access to benefits is quite poor. You can spend perhaps 2 or 3 months before you get any money on the benefit system, and I think that's the biggest problem, because by the time you get the money, it's too late. You've already on the streets by then. And I think that's something that really needs to be tackled. I'm not sure how universal credit might work there or not, because it's not rolled out yet. But hopefully we can reform that so that you actually get your benefits straight away. Because the fact that you may have earned too much money over the year, well, you didn't foresee yourself becoming unemployed, so you wouldn't necessarily put that money away to pay for the next 3 months when they won't give you the benefit that you're entitled to. So I think that needs to be changed, and I also agree with Chris about raising the minimum wage. We do have to get more and more people out of the benefit system, because in the end, really it's employers that should be paying for that, not us.
Okay, John.
Yes, basically in a rich society it's an absolute disgrace that we have people sort of having to resort to food banks, and it's totally unnecessary. The government policies could change that quickly. The Green policy is to have a basic income where everyone gets a basic level of income, whatever their status. There's no sanctions on it. In Southampton, we've actually got loads of people. It's one of the black spots in the country for a number of people getting sanctioned. That means getting no money for very poor people, no money at all for weeks, sometimes months. It's absolutely a disgrace.
Can I say, we're the third worst area in the country for sanctions in Southampton.
And I'd just say on the basic income, people tend to think that's a mad green idea, but in fact it was actually first thought of by Milton Friedman, who's a monetarist for The Economist amongst you, and it's actually completely well costed. It's a very good idea because it actually allows people to earn money over that basic income without becoming trapped in poverty. You also have a living wage of £10 an hour as well.
Great. Alan.
Yeah, the report that has just been mentioned, which emphasised the 1 million people now using food banks, also had a section in it on what were the main causes reported. This is the Trestle Trust, on why people were using food banks. And the number one was benefits not arriving, number one cause. And the number two was changes in benefit rules. Yep. And benefits not arriving, it relates to the whole question of how difficult it is to actually establish a system of benefits now. Benefits changes is very much about this inhumane system of sanctioning the bedroom tax, the ATOS rules, all of which, frankly, demonise people who are, from necessity, often needing to go to food banks because of their particular circumstances. That has got to change.
Okay, thank you. Pauline.
Yes. For a supposedly wealthy country, we have at least 2 million people living in poverty. And so that is diabolical. If you go around Southampton and you notice all the people begging on the streets and so on, that is just unacceptable. So we've heard from all the people on this platform about all the sanctions problems. I don't know if any of you have ever been unemployed and know how the benefit system in the UK works, but my understanding is that if people are a few minutes late or they haven't signed the right form or they had a clash in their appointments and they don't turn up to their interview at the job centre, their benefits can be stopped for 3 weeks, 3 months or whatever. So it is a very poor system.
Okay, Jeremy, you had something to say on.
Yeah, I mean, a few things. I mean, firstly, it is clearly a real problem that does need to be tackled. But if I can sensitively inject some facts into the debate, because we do hear this, the language gets more and more exaggerated. The Trestle Trust report said 500,000 people using food banks on average twice, and that was where the million figure came from, which is obviously far too high. But that then gets turned into 1 million people, then that gets turned into 1 million people a day, and I'm not, all those figures are too high, but I do think we need to stick to the facts. The way you tackle that is you get the economy growing, you get people into work, you cut the tax for the low paid, you do raise the minimum wage, and the minimum wage has risen above inflation. And the Conservative policy is really that people earning the minimum wage shouldn't pay any tax, and we want to raise the income tax threshold. So I think that is it. That is the way to do it in the long term. But in the short term, where there are problems, you've got to tackle them. And the government has given local authorities hundreds of millions of pounds to deal with issues where there are problems. And finally, on ATOS, I think a lot of these problems are not necessarily policy, but just the bureaucracy and the incompetence of the people that run these services. And Labour, you appointed ATOS, the Conservatives sacked them.
Thank you, Jeremy. Chris.
Two things. First of all, can I just say on the Trestle Trust figures, I hear what is being said, but I'll just point out that there are as many independent food banks in this country as there are Trestle Trust, and actually the one in Southampton started 4 years before Trestle Trust was ever set up. So there's that. The other thing is that those millions of pounds that were given to local government was stopped. And actually that money came back, but was not ring-fenced. And so in Southampton, that really useful help that's been given to those people, we've now lost that.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else want to come in on this? Okay, then we'll talk about how the Green Party mentioned establishing the basic income. in comparison to Jeremy, you're raising the tax threshold?
Well, I think that the Green Party are in a great position because they can talk absolute nonsense and no one really ever challenges them.
So Milton Friedman was talking rubbish.
And I mean that in the nicest possible way.
So Milton Friedman was talking rubbish, was he?
I mean, you can make all these promises which are clearly not costed, that clearly are not affordable and will bank up the country. So, I mean, we could pick them all apart individually.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm going to go to John. I think you have something to say.
Well, I'll just say, I don't know if you heard that Milton Friedman obviously came from the Milton Friedman, and it was actually well costed, and the whole manifesto has been costed. And although I've been talking about ways we spend money, there are also a whole range of areas where we would save money, like obviously taxing the wealthy, 1% tax on the wealthy. We would cut Trident completely.
Okay, I'm going to have to...
just make one point. Just make one point on what we're talking about here. I believe we're talking about a citizen's wage. Is that right?
Pardon?
Citizen's income, yeah. The citizen's income was mooted by Green Party leader to be £80 a week. You can't live off £80 a week if you're on benefits already and you only get your citizen's income. And it does replace all benefits. It is not in addition to benefits.
I'm going to have to end that there, John.
That's what
you guys. Yeah, we're going to go on to the next question now regarding the internet. Thanks, guys. So yeah, freedom and security threats that the internet can pose has been discussed much by policymakers. Now, you guys have proposed laws for monitoring of the internet. What would be your policy if you were elected? Let's start off with the Green Party.
Sorry, I was arguing with my nose. Okay.
So yeah, the internet offers freedom and it also offers a security threat to the country.
Okay. Yeah, well, this has obviously come down to things like the George Orwell's 1984, and of course George Orwell didn't realise the half of what could be done with computers. And there's been several times this Snoopers Charter has been proposed in Parliament, and they're basically trying to make sure that the security forces, security services can actually access whatever emails or whatever they want, whenever they want it. And we've got to resist that. That's the responsibility of government to do that, and I really don't think you can trust the planet killer parties to do that. So what we would say is mass surveillance is not acceptable. It's also talking about the censorship of the internet, and I think the internet was always born of being a free source of income, source of information, and it's really become that. But we would suggest that things like protection for young children and banning of advertising targeted at children of primary age should be stopped. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Adrian?
Well, we want to introduce a digital bill of rights. Digital bill of rights would give you the right to control your own data. So you would be able to take your data off the internet, put it on. It's your data. It's about you. You should be able to change it. We want to protect the internet as it is, but we do want to provide that digital bill of rights would mean that companies would have to provide, internet providers would have to provide guidance for parents and users as to what about the programs that they're on. And we stop the Snoopers Charter. We don't want to bring that in. We want a Freedom Act so that people do have your freedom of information and your rights are protected online as well as offline.
Okay, thank you. Jeremy?
Well, I mean, it's an almost impossible question to answer. It's the sort of thing you'd have as an essay question, isn't it? Because you've got two competing things. You've got the need to keep your country safe versus the freedom that we all enjoy, that we cherish and we want to keep. So I think it's a massive dilemma. I mean, I take issue with John, because he keeps using the George Orwell thing. We've heard all the jokes and everything before on this panel, so it's repetitive arguments. But the George Orwell thing, we don't live in George Orwell's 1984. We live in the freest democracy in the world. We live in the best country in the world, and we want to protect it. I think we just need to challenge some of the hyperbole that's sometimes mentioned. I mean, I guess my starting point is as a liberal, I think we should have freedom of speech, freedom of expression. I think we should try and protect that. But then I don't want a major terrorist incident happening in my country. And I think you often see that politicians go into Parliament or go into government with those sorts of aspirations.
I'm going to push Jeremy.
After a number of years, they change their views. And I think that's because they see the dangers of the world that are out there.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you there, Jeremy. Next, we're going to be talking to Pauline. Your views on the internet and censorship?
Yes, well, we hear that the internet and social media are fantastic. Well, they can be, but it's a double-edged sword, as we all know. And some of us have have suffered as a result of messages that people have posted up on the internet. There's also what we hear about the dark net, which has information and visual material that most of us probably wouldn't want to see. I do believe that it's important to protect children and vulnerable people from the dangers of the internet, you know, this idea of grooming people and all that sort of thing. So I'm a 100% supporter of ensuring that we do have protection in place, but also warn people that it is not as free and simple as many of us might think.
Okay. Thank you, Berlin. Alan?
I would tend to agree with Jeremy that this is more of an essay question than an election question, because basically we're still in a world where we are grappling with all the issues of the internet as if it were a load of printed books and letters and postcards. It's quite different in principle, and clearly one of the principles is it should be as free as possible, and that's one of the great advantages of the internet. But also that there should be proper protection, I would suggest through Ofcom, for making sure that protection for young children is not something that's an advisory free idea for service providers, but is actually something that is properly enforced and regulated. I also think there's a whole series of issues unfolding about things such as the right to be forgotten within the system and how that then works out through the internet. And clearly that balance is still a long way from being properly provided.
Okay, I'm going to pass it to Chris now. Chris?
I think actually, you know, what you're hearing is that we're all pretty well in agreement. The fact is, we want freedom to be able to get information from the internet and to use the internet fully, but at the same time, we want adequate protection. We don't want to be snooped. I don't want to be demonised for looking at the wrong site, but at the same time, I want protection there for my grandchildren and for young people. I do think that we need, and in some cases we already have, a situation where the protection is already there and we have to choose to opt out rather than having to choose to opt in. But we've got to get the balance right, haven't we, between having that freedom and having the protection that Jeremy so rightly says. Well, the last thing we want is terrorist stuff going on in this country.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, Alan and Jeremy, you mentioned that maybe you can't look at this because it's sort of an essay question, but then we've got to keep in mind that the Liberal Democrat Party do have a stance on, you know, the Digital Bill of Rights. I mean, they are making some headway into this issue. I mean, what are you guys doing?
Sorry, the question of the Liberal Democrats putting
so,
forward...
yeah, they have a Digital Bill of Rights. They are making some headway into this whole topic. What are you guys doing?
Well, the question of the Bill of Rights, again, I think is a further essay topic, which perhaps we need to discuss at greater depth. I personally would be in favour of a much greater codification, if you like, of what is essentially our unwritten constitution. And the Bill of Rights is a part of that process. But a Bill of Rights which simply gave people various theoretical rights, I'm afraid would end up being rather like the Liberal Democrats in the last coalition government, which is they had some theoretical positions, but they didn't actually work very well in practice because they were complete hostages of the majority party in government. So it needs to be followed up by real things that make those theoretical rights actually work.
Yeah, I mean, you can say a Bill of Rights, and it's just a slogan at the end of the day. The devil is in the detail, and I think it's incumbent on all elected politicians in Parliament, and this is something where we've all said we pretty much agree. Actually, MPs working in their select committees and so on can work really hard to make the legislation the best it possibly can be. So we do achieve that very difficult balance that I think we've all talked about. So I think the devil is in the detail, and the slogan doesn't really help an enormous amount. In terms of Conservative policy, I think where we're going more strongly now, and David Cameron is pushing, is for more strengthening around the rules around children's access to online.
Thanks. Does anyone else want to weigh in on this issue?
I'd just say the Green Party in favour of the Constitution as well, and that would include a Bill of Rights, this sort of thing. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I guess that's it for that question then. We're going to be moving on to the final question of tonight regarding climate change. So the UN climate talks in Paris are looming. They're going to be towards the end of 2015. And it's a key year for green alternatives to our conventional methods of energy sourcing. So what are your policies? I'm going to start off with the Green Party.
Right, well, obviously this is the thing I majored on at the start, is nothing's more important for the future of us all, and this is not some sort of side thing, it's actually going to affect the long term. For instance, already we've got air pollution, that's 1 in 12 deaths in London are linked to, cuts our life expectancy by 6 months on average more in a city like this. And we've also got, it also reduces the potential lifespan in other areas as well, pollution. But we've also got, it could be damaging the natural restorative systems, but also on things like energy, well, climate change in particular. We are 25th out of the 27 in the European Union on our energy league tables, i.e. places like Nordic countries spend a third to a quarter of their, or get a third to a quarter of their energy generated by renewable sources, and it's 4% in the UK. It's absolutely pathetic. We do very, very little.
Okay, I'm going to push you, John.
I'd just say we're going to spend 35 billion on renewables, and what else could I say? We have to have targets for global greenhouse emissions, and we endorse the role that UN's playing in this, and we very much support that.
Thank you, John. Pauline.
Yes, with regard to the environment and renewable energy, UKIP supports the use of tidal power and solar power. We're a bit more sceptical about wind because unless you're in a very exposed place, it's limited, the energy that you can achieve from that. So we'll definitely support projects where we can get as much energy as possible. With regard to the wider environment, the best thing all of us can do is actually limit the number of children we have. So, you know, that in itself will help the environment and the planet. So do think about that. Okay.
Thank you, Pauline. So, yeah, we're going to go over to Alan next. Alan. Thank you, everyone.
Sorry, moving swiftly on. We've absolutely got to get an ambitious deal at Paris at the end of the year, the Paris 2015 talks. And those in particular will be talks which will pretty much set in line what we do about keeping climate, global warming, down below 2 degrees by 2050. And a lot of the work that goes into making that possible has to be done now. It's not just a question of hoping it's going to be all right and happening in 2050. And the particular thing that we need to do, if we are serious about those Paris talks, is decarbonise our energy supplies urgently. And what Labour is saying is that we will set in stone the idea that our energy supply should be decarbonised by 2030 at the latest. And just think that 70% of our CO2 emissions actually come from energy production or use.
I'm going to have to cut you off there, Alan.
Essential. If we don't do it, we'll miss
out. We're going to be moving into Adrian
soon.
Adrian.
Oh yeah, well I like to think the Liberal Democrats are the alternative Green Party. we are actually very green. We are front page of our manifesto. We have 5 new green laws. And one of the things we want to do is to make the country entirely dependent on renewable energy by 2050, which I'm very much in support of. I already am at home. We also want to make sure we want to introduce a Nature Act, a zero waste bill, green transport bill, Green Buildings Act, electrify the railways, protect our forests, plant more trees, more electric vehicles. I mean, the list goes on. We have a very long list of green policies, which I'm very pleased about because I personally am a very much supporter of renewable energy, wave power, tidal power, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. Chris.
Yeah, Alan's absolutely right. This is an international issue. We can't do it on our own. We can't do it in the UK. We're just a relatively small rock in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, so we can't do it on our own. More has to be done, and particularly the emerging economies and the USA, I've got to say, we've got to do more internationally. We've got to continue to cut our reliance on fossil fuels. Here's a thought, though. Wouldn't it be fantastic if Southampton University and Solent University could be world leaders in the innovation and manufacture and development of the types of stuff that we need to be able to produce the green energy that we actually want?
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Jeremy.
Well, it's a massively important issue, and we are making good progress. I mean, in the last Parliament, greenhouse gases have been cut by 15%, and the amount of renewables has been doubled. So I think we want to continue on that positive path. Maybe just focus on Southampton and what we can do in our city. I mean, there was a scheme under the government for incentivising solar panels, and eventually it was so successful that the government cut the feed-in tariff rate because all the money was spent. But I was busy putting as many solar panels on as many schools and high-rise buildings as we possibly could, and we stuffed just about as much as we could on there before the money ran out. But I'm keen on micro-generation. I think for cities that's a good thing, little small power stations. And I was disappointed that the Vosper's site, the development at Crest Nicholson, that had the opportunity to have a sewerage biomass combined heat and power station, and that didn't come off, and that was a disappointment. But that shows the sort of vision that we could achieve.
Okay, I'm going to push you, Jeremy.
And finally, if I may, just when politicians come to Southampton, if you invite Ed Miliband or David Cameron down to see Southampton, they either take you to see the power station down by Toys R Us, or they take you to see the oscillating tidal snake over the road. And I would love to see one day that oscillating tidal snake in production and actually in place in the Solent, generating some energy.
Thank you, Jeremy. Now, what I've gathered from this is the Liberal Democrats do have quite an extensive view on environmental issues. Does anyone else think that might be unachievable, their targets? I'm guessing not. Their targets are pretty extensive and pretty high. Do you think they're unachievable?
Well, actually, their targets aren't, because, indeed, in the last government period, I specifically was a part of a process of putting on the floor of the House of Commons a motion that we should put into legislation that our energy supply should be decarbonised by 2030, and that means you phase out coal in the early 2020s. It means that actually you bring in carbon capture and storage for any remaining fossil fuels that are in place, because you can't...
Alan, could I just cut in on this point
And it
quickly?
means you have to have a majority of your power supplied by renewables. The Liberal Democrats voted against that view in the last Parliament, along with the Conservatives.
Alan, you mentioned that you want to decarbonise the energy supply by 2030, whilst the Liberal Democrats did say they set a 2050 limit on becoming entirely green. Why do you think your process would be more effective?
Well, because you can't just have business as usual and then suddenly in 2049 repent of all your profligate ways and decide to decarbonise everything, because all the stuff is still out there in the process. It's got to be a notched process of getting rid of carbon emissions year by year, 5 years by 5 years, so you get to the 2050 position with a real chance of the planet not warming up above that 2 degrees level. If you don't do it early, you've lost your chance to do it forever.
Okay, John.
Yeah, well, the problem with the targets is that they're actually being made weaker than they need to be in order to be achievable. But what happens is, there's all these parties, they promise everything at election time, but what's the first thing to go? It's these green promises. You can't trust them an inch, I'm afraid. But so in fact, what you need to do, if you actually want to keep to the below 2% of the pre-industrial levels, we would have to cut our greenhouse gas emissions by 90% by 2030. And no one's targeting that at the moment.
Okay, does anyone else want to come in on this? Okay, yeah, you guys, John, you mentioned that you can't trust the other parties with their environmental targets. Does anyone else agree with this? Or so you all agree you can't be trusted on setting targets regarding environmental issues?
Well, I think you can't trust the Green Party, because I think they have got absolutely no way at all of delivering half the things they talk about, because
Give us
they
a chance.
would wreck the economy in reality. We'd all be back in the Stone Age if we had a Green government.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Just to be controversial.
Can I just say, the one thing that we could do is become world leaders in the innovation and design of the stuff that we need to actually achieve this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, guys. Okay, now I'm going to ask you guys for your closing statements, please. We can start off with Alan.
I think I finished where I started, and that is that this election is really not just a choice of which MP you elect for which seat. but it's a question of which government you want to make sure can take Britain through the next 5 years. And indeed, in terms of what we've just been talking about, not just the next 5 years, but on the watch of that particular government, many things which are going to have a fundamental impact over decades to follow. And in terms of what we've discussed tonight, it seems to me that the clear alternative that we need to focus on is how a Labour government would take this country with a better plan in a different direction as far as prosperity in this country, radiating out to all the population and not just a few, and setting in train those processes for the longer term, which will serve us in good stead up to 2050.
Thank you, Alan. John.
Well, basically, if you want green policies, you have to vote green. We don't have time to sort of mess around with these tactical voting and the planet killer parties. We have to vote. You have to vote for what you believe in, or we will never get the change we need. So that's simply it. Vote for what you believe in. Look at voteforpolicies.org.uk if you're not sure about the policies, but the Green Party does pretty well, and if you voted according to the way you believe, we'd actually have a chance of winning.
Okay, thank you very much. Pauline.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm not quite sure how many of you are actually Southampton Test voters or whether you'll be voting at your home constituency. I've given you a few things to think about, which maybe you may have known about or didn't know about. But if you want further information, just have a look at the ukip.org website. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jeremy.
Yeah, on the issue of the government, I think that there is a very clear choice between whether we keep going down the path that we're going with a strong economy, creating jobs, creating opportunities, and it's been a painful 5 years to get there, or we go back to where we were, and we risk our future as a country. And if we don't have that good economy, if we don't have those jobs, we won't have the wealth that we want to pay for all the things that we value, like the schools and the hospitals and so on. But from my point of view, if I'm elected to be the MP for this area, I want to be a constructive voice in Parliament. I think we make far too many laws and we make them badly, and I want to play my part in actually making sure that we pass good legislation and laws that benefit Southampton.
Thanks. Chris.
I meet and talk to an awful lot of people, and one of the things that I've found is that a huge number of people are totally disillusioned, misrepresented and disengaged from politics. They're fed up with it. We're fed up with hearing the same stuff over and over again. And I think now is an opportunity to change. Let's develop a voice in Parliament that cuts through the party machine and avoids the whip's office. And let's develop a form of government by consensus where politicians sit down and actually agree together what's best for this country and work towards that. Let's narrow the gap between the rich and the poor. Let's do something different this time. Let's vote for an independent voice.
Thank you, Chris. Adrian.
Okay, I think you need somebody in a government who is going to keep an eye on everything, which we've tried to do over the last 5 years. We've learnt a lot of lessons doing that. That's the first time I've had a coalition for a very long time. We have learnt our lessons. We are really the only centre party in British politics, so we would want to choose a middle road on the economy. We want a non-privatised NHS, a greener Britain, and we want a fairer society with equality and opportunity for everybody.
Thank you very much. And that isn't the end of the debates, because we're going to be handing over to you guys with a Q&A session. So, Tom.
So, yeah, we're going to have a Q&A session. This is the free chance for anyone in the audience who feels that their issue or question hasn't been tackled yet. Is there anyone here, because it hasn't been touched on quite frequently tonight, the economy? Anyone with a burning question about the economy? Nothing about the economy? Any other questions at all? Anyone over here in the blue jacket?
So, as students, one of the big things that we're continually told about as an issue is housing and rent and keeping up the standards of student housing in particular. And I wondered whether the panel had any particular ideas quite local to Southampton about what they'd do to either make sure that tenant agencies aren't pressuring students unnecessarily to sign for houses that are substandard, and ensure that the housing for students is up to quality so that we're living in reasonable accommodation rather than some of the less than ideal houses that people are living in.
Okay, thank you. That's housing standards regarding students. Anyone else wants to jump in? John.
At the moment, there are 1.8 million households on waiting lists for social housing. We've basically got to build more houses. We've got to build council house type houses and enable the councils to do that again. In the 1950s, they used to build 200,000 social homes a year. So what we would aim to do, if we promised in the manifesto, provide 500,000 social rented homes by 2020 and bring empty homes back into use, and we'd basically make sure everyone has access to an affordable place to live.
Okay, John,
capping
can we
rents.
make this a bit more relevant to student housing?
Student housing, well, basically there are a lot of flats have gone up recently, but it's...
Or the rental market, if you want.
Yeah, it's about having protected the tenants rather than it used to be a lot of, well, at the moment there's a lot of in favour of the landlord, and it really needs to go, the balance needs to go the other way, which is cap rents, and you have tenants protection, and so people aren't chucked out of the street very quickly, and licensed landlords.
Okay, thank you, John. Adrian.
Yeah, well, just been mentioned there, licensed landlords. We've been doing quite a lot of work locally on that over the last 5 years, introducing a landlord register for houses of multiple occupancy. Unfortunately, not all landlords are actually on it, and I was in a local residents association meeting where it was decided we wanted to make sure more of them were on it. But it benefits everybody. That also benefits students. It means that if a landlord's registered, then students can find out, it's a public register, you can find out who the landlord is and challenge that. But I'd also like to see agencies not be able to charge anybody for renting a property, for finding a property. At the moment, you'll pay an upfront fee, you might pay a monthly deposit, and an agency fee to find the property in the first place.
Okay, does anyone else want to come in? Yeah, we'll start with Dan again, Jeremy.
The number of HMOs there are in Southampton, which is about 7,000 or 8,000, are largely the habitation of students in Southampton if they're not in halls. And those HMOs, there are some good ones, but a lot of them, not only are they let out by letting agents who charge rip-off fees in the first place, secondly, they are overwhelmingly very badly insulated as far as their energy efficiency is concerned, and thirdly, they are very insecure as far as tenancies are concerned. And the proposals that the Labour Party has to introduce secure tenancies, to cap rent increases and not above the rate of inflation over the period of more secure tenancies.
I'm going to have to cut you off.
To ban letting agents from charging rip-off fees and have a national register of landlords, I think all would make a tremendous difference to the HMO.
Okay, we're going to have to end this question here now.
And how students...
Sorry. Yeah, because Tom has another question for us. Tom.
So, anyone else here in the audience have a burning question? Anyone at all? Down here.
So you've talked about the NHS, but do you have any way of approaching mental health, any particular focus on that?
Okay, mental health, anyone? Yeah, Adrian.
Yeah, we in our manifesto, we have made a commitment to have equality for mental health, so that mental health patients get treated the same as every other patient, because at the moment they don't. Mental health waiting lists are a lot longer than they are for other things in the NHS, and we want to change that. So part of the money that we want to see go in the NHS and the first year would go towards securing that and securing better quality and quicker treatment for mental health issues.
Okay, Chris, yeah.
On that, I think that one of the issues is spotting, better training for spotting early mental health issues. I think it's a false economy, but if we leave it too late, then actually the need gets even greater. So I agree with that we need to put the same emphasis on mental health, but actually more training to spot things in the early days.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I realise I've been neglecting people on the end, so clearly, really sorry about that.
UKIP would commit to investing an extra £1.5 billion in mental health and dementia services over the next 5 years, and to integrate health and social care, which at the moment, you may be aware, those are completely separate.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, John.
Just say in our manifesto, we did say make mental health a much higher priority with the resources to match this status.
Thank you for keeping it short. Anyone else want to?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's an issue in the NHS of the lack of equality between what is seen as access to services for physical health and what is seen as access to services for mental health. And most of the targets that have been put in over the last few years do not apply to mental health
and I'm going to push for your own policy, please.
And access, for example, to talking therapies within a month would in itself actually improve greatly the status of those people who are using mental health services within the NHS.
Jeremy, I'm going to give you a few seconds.
Yeah, okay. I mean, on a slightly different point then, I think the Health and Social Care Act actually giving clinical commissioners the freedom to choose the people that are best placed to provide services actually does help exactly in the situation with things like mental health. I mean, I think that given that they've got now the freedom to say they will contract with, say, a charity like Mind, Solent Mind in our local case, I think actually that gives them the freedom to pick the best possible people for the circumstances in question, rather than the dogma of everything has to be done by the NHS because these people know how to deliver it better. Well, often they don't. Often the charitable sector has a better answer.
Okay, we're going to have to end this question because Tom's waiting for me.
Well, we're not neglecting people at home as well who are tweeting with the hashtag #VoteSotten2015. So for you guys at the table, Elliot Smith 199 has tweeted and said, as millions of people are getting their wages topped up by the taxpayer via in-work benefits, do you support a living wage?
So, does anyone want to begin on that?
I said it earlier on, I really believe that we need a minimum wage. I agree with Green, I agree with the Liberals that actually £10 an hour makes sense. It does a number of things. Number one, it seems odd to me that we keep on changing the tax level. Actually what it's meant is that we've got millions of people now who aren't able to pay anything towards the tax. So actually you then get the Chancellor actually looking in absolute surprise that there's less money coming into the Exchequer than he expected. Actually, if the minimum wage was high enough so that people were actually brought back into a situation where they could pay their way.
Okay, anyone else want to? Aaron?
Yeah, we're talking not just here about minimum wage, we're talking about living wage. And the minimum wage is the basic guideline, if you like, and certainly Labour would want to increase that considerably by the next period to at least £8 an hour, plus whatever inflation introduced. But then above that is living wage, which is the point at which you don't necessarily have your wages topped up completely by in-work benefits. And actually, it makes long-term economic sense to push employers towards paying the living wage, because actually you wouldn't then have the state having to contribute the money that the employers aren't paying in the first place to get the people into a decent wage position. Certainly Labour wants to move firmly along that path.
Making work pay, definitely, people should, if they are going out to work, be able to at least pay their bills. We heard earlier this evening of the millions of people relying on food banks and help from family and friends just to survive. So definitely a living wage rather than the minimum wage. That is, you know, for a rich country, supposedly, we sadly are not managing the situation very well.
Okay, I'm going to have to end the debates here now. Tom?
Well, we're moving to one more question here in Garden Court. It's got a burning question. This gentleman over here.
Given that we're going to be living with a coalition government for another 5 years by the looks of it, I just wondered if each member could say whichever member or whichever party they'd most likely to go into a coalition government.
Okay, very good question. Because this question, I'm going to start off with Chris, since he doesn't have to work anymore.
Do you know, the beauty of being an independent voice is that actually you judge things issue by issue. So, none of them.
Thanks, Chris. Adrian, can you keep this one?
Okay, I'm going to give you two answers. The Liberal Democrats' answer is that we'll wait and see what the situation is when we get past the election. My answer is Labour Party.
Okay. John?
Just to say, I used to be a member of the Labour Party, and I've realised what a mistake that was. So I'm not going to go for them. I would go for independent.
Jeremy?
Well, I think I was actually quite surprised at Chris. I would have thought you were the new politics man. You'd want to be in bed with all of us.
Well,
you're actually the most obstinate.
Issue by issue.
Well, now that Nick's left, I think we can all say we all get on very well. We'd all become friends. So I think we'd all get together in a coalition. But in terms of the national government, I mean, I obviously want a Conservative government. I'm a Conservative politician, and I think that's best for the country. But I think the coalition with the Liberal Democrats has delivered on the big issues for the country. It's turned the economy round, and I think if that was to be the case again, I think we would probably work well together. I think the worst possible combination would be the Scottish National Party and the Labour Party. I think the Labour Party would just be in the vice of Nicola Sturgeon pushing all the buttons. I don't think that would be in the interests of the UK. I'm choosing my words carefully here. And I think particularly for the English, I think we would lose out massively. And
Just
there is a constitutional
It might actually be
imbalance.
Nicola Sturgeon, it might be Alex Salmond, so, you know, who knows. But Alan, yeah.
Whoever's holding the...
Well, I mean, Jeremy, who is a thoroughly decent human being, almost fell into the Conservative Central Office trap for a moment there and then pulled himself out of it just at the last moment. Of course, that's nonsense, Jeremy, as you know about the SNP. There won't be a coalition with the SNP if, in the instance that Labour does not achieve an overall majority, Labour is faced with being in government. But I have to say, one thing that's very important is that in the UK Parliament, all seats are equal. There isn't a demonic force coming north
John, I'm
from
going to
the
push you
north
for
of the
your
border
preferences
that's going
now.
to do us all in. What would actually happen, I think, is indeed a minority government would be faced with a position not of going into coalition, but of actually putting forward a programme which other parties who profess to support those kinds of programme would be challenged then to vote down.
Okay,
Let's
thank
see
you,
what
Alan,
would
for not
happen
choosing the
under those
party.
circumstances.
UKIP MPs will talk to any other party where we have common interest. But as you can sense, there are some of the losers on here who unfortunately may end up being in government and we'll be suffering for the next 5 years. So that is what I'm expecting to find on the 10th of May when the dust settles.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. So yeah, I think that is the end of the debate, so I hope we've answered as many of your questions as we possibly could. And yeah, we'll see you soon. Okay, we're going to throw it over to Tom now just to end this debate.
So, obviously, the debates have
Tom.
just finished behind me. Hello, Kash. Thank you very much for an interesting debate to everyone. Obviously, remember the debate continues on Twitter with the hashtag #VoteSoutton2015. So if any of you'd like to stick around, we're going to be going out live, providing some analysis from tonight's event. But thank you very much for attending. So yeah, as I said, that is it for tonight's debate. I'm going to be getting some audience reaction and some analysis. So let's have a little look at Twitter so far. Unfortunately, where I'm positioned, if I position myself over here, I might not get anyone standing in front of me. So, with the analysis, let's have a little look. So we've covered tuition fees, the NHS, transport, primary and secondary education, online privacy, censorship, and the problems facing a connected world, and finally, the environment. So Kash has been on stage chairing the debate with the candidates from an independent candidate, from the Lib Dems, from the Greens, from the Conservatives, Labour and UKIP, with notably the TUSC candidate having to leave halfway through. So let's have a little look at what happened throughout the night. So the area of conversation that happened tonight was obviously locally, but also nationally. A question from you guys at home on Twitter highlighted the increasing use of food banks over the last financial year. The independent candidate, Chris Davis, and Lib Dems' Adrian Ford agreed that the changes in taxes and benefits were partly to blame for the increasing use of food banks. Labour's Alan Whitehead reiterated these issues down to the changes to benefits. John Cottonwood and the Greens stated that the Southampton area is the third worst affected region for these benefit sanctions, and that's probably why we're suffering with food banks here in the UK. So, I'm going to try and find some people on the way out. Guys, are you willing to have a little chat? Step in here. So, what did you think of tonight's debate?
It was interesting. I'm an EU student, so I don't know much about British politics. So I came here to find out what the different views were, what the different parties were. So I think I got quite a lot of information I need to think about now.
So you're going to be voting on the 7th of May, are you?
Yes, I am.
Has this swayed any preconceptions you had about particular parties beforehand? Changed your opinion on anyone in particular?
No, it hasn't particularly. It's made me understand why there are certain opinions about certain parties, actually, and what the different conflicts are.
What did you think about tonight's debates?
I think it was interesting to see all the different points of view. I still need to look into it more. I think read some manifestos and then decide from there.
So you're still undecided, leaving this room. Okay, thank you very much for coming tonight, guys. Thank you for being on TV with us as well. So I'm going to be heading down this way. Let me see if... Well, we've got these two. Hi, guys. I spoke to you earlier on. Do you feel like Jeremy did well? Obviously, Conservative support here. Do you feel like Jeremy did well tonight?
Yes, I think Jeremy did do a good job. I think the country is moving in a good direction. I feel that Alan's final comment was horrendously disingenuous. For a long-term parliamentarian, he knows full well that every seat in Parliament is not equal. While every seat in Parliament may get an equal vote on every issue, every MP does not get an equal say in what comes up for voting on.
What did you think about tonight?
Well, I think generally Jeremy's a great guy. I mean, whatever party you want to support, I think Jeremy's really kind of focused on local issues. And I think for people in this area, he's definitely the right man for the job. And I think he addressed a lot of the questions very well. I think he's got a clear plan moving forward for the local area and for the country.
Well, thank you very much for chatting to us tonight, guys. Thank you. So I'm going to be heading down this way. Let me see if I can switch to another camera and see if I can get some different opinions on tonight's debate. Let's see if anyone's willing to have a chat. Are you guys willing to come and have a quick chat? Yeah, so we are talking about what we thought about tonight's debate. How did you feel it went down?
No, I think it was very interesting. I think it was very nice, much better tempered than the debate that was held the other day for the neighbouring constituency. So I was pleased about that. Would have liked Europe to have been mentioned as an issue. I think that was kind of ignored. But no, I thought in general a very good debate. Nice to have an independent candidate as well to mix things up a bit, which is always good. Pity the Tusk member had to leave early as well. It would have been nice to have had him on the panel to finish it. But other than that, yeah, very good debate, I thought.
So we're trying to figure out tonight if people that came into this room beforehand were decided. Had you had a decision in mind?
I had decided before I came in here, yeah, I had.
And are you reaffirmed by that decision after sitting in this room?
I am actually. I'm pleasantly surprised as well. The candidates actually exceeded my expectations, so I'm quite pleased about that.
Okay, well, I'm apparently being told that the UKIP candidate, thank you very much for chatting to us, by the way, the UKIP candidate is right behind me. Where am I going over to? I'm going over to the table over there. Let's go and have a little chat. Hi there, did you want to come and have a little chat? How did you feel that tonight's debate went?
I thought it was very interesting. I thought there were probably only two candidates that had anything serious and sensible to say and listen to.
Who were those candidates?
That would be the Tory and the Labour one. I thought the rest of them, I'm afraid, were a bit off the wall. Chris Davis is very laudable in what he says, but I really can't see how, as an independent, he can have any influence at all. And, you know, he's standing as the voice for the voiceless. But actually, if he did get elected an MP, he would be the voiceless voice for the voiceless because he just couldn't do anything. So laudable as it sounded, it was pretty empty words, really.
It was. So obviously the support for the Labour and the Tories because they can make the best difference in the government, obviously, next time round.
Yeah, I think they're the only two that offer anything. I mean, the Lib Dems, you know, repeal the Health and Social Care Act. Well, why did you vote for it in the first place? You know, you can't fool the electorate. You have supported most of the things that have gone through, that the Tories have put through. You can't expect us now to forget what you have done.
Thank you very much for chatting to us. I hope your decision has been sort of reaffirmed tonight. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, all right? Bye. So I'm being told that I should try and grab the UKIP candidate for a chat. Let's head over this way. So over here, let me try and find someone who I can chat to. Let me grab Alan Whitehead, who's over here. Alan, is it okay to come and have a little chat quickly for the TV? Obviously, if you stand here for me, thank you. You've obviously been the MP for this area since 1997, so it's a long, long time. Do you feel like you can go into this with full strength and keep going as long as you want to?
Well, we've got fixed-term parliaments now for 5 years, so I'm putting myself forward for a 5-year term. And obviously no one goes on forever.
No. But how did you feel like tonight's debate went? Did you feel like the topic of conversation that was brought up by the students and the local residents was interesting, and do you feel like the questions were answered?
Well, I thought it was a very good debate this evening, and I thought it was an opportunity, unlike some of the hustings that I've been involved in, where actually you did get a really good balanced view of the questions and the answers. And I think it's all credit to the organisation of the hustings this evening that was allowed to happen, and people could make a judgment on the basis of everyone being able to put their views forward, I think without fear or favour on any side, and get the points across properly. So it was a really good evening, I think, as a result.
So what's next for you from tonight? Obviously 7th of May is the next goal, but what are you doing in between now?
Basically knocking on a great deal of doors and making sure that we can talk to as many people as possible face-to-face before the election, and either answer their questions or put across what we want to say, and make sure that they are as aware of the issues as they possibly can be. And this hustings has been a really good fillip forward in that direction, I think.
So will those households include some student households that you'll be chatting to?
I should think it would be, and I hope some of the things that we are saying about how student households can benefit from what Labour's saying about rented property, security of tenure, and standards of warmth and security in the houses that we know students are living in across the city.
So that was one of the key issues, obviously, for students that they brought up, was housing. How important is it that these students watching at home go out and vote on the 7th of May?
Well, I think it's important for two reasons. Firstly, because young people in general don't go out to vote to the same extent as, say, much older people vote. So in the end, if you're a young person and you don't go out and vote, then it is quite possible that governments will decide that the people who do vote get all the goodies. And so, A, to go out and vote for yourself for that reason, but secondly, to make sure that the real choice we've got, I think, which is between whether we go on as we are or whether we make a change over the next period in terms of government, is something that you can positively do something about and make a change when you go into the ballot box.
Well, thank you very much, Alan Whitehead. Good luck up until now on the 7th of May. Hopefully you get the result that you want on the day. Thank you very much for chatting to us. Thank you. So we are going to continue looking around for people. Let me grab Charlotte over here. Someone's come in. Charlotte, so you were sat in a front row seat for tonight's debate. How do you feel that tonight went? Did you have questions that you were on the tip of your tongue answered that other people had asked, or do you feel like there were certain issues that didn't get brought up?
I think the issue that I have when I go to political arguments is the fact that I'm not very political. I mainly sort of care about people and I think about the policies individually. So the independent candidate, what he was talking about was sort of, I agreed with most of the stuff he said, because he thought about the core issues which affect the people locally. And you can tell his campaign about the issues for like Southampton for a very long time. I was thinking about mental health because personally it's very important to me. And then when someone brought the question up, I thought it was fantastic. I just personally didn't think of the conversation because I was just involved in the conversation going on. I didn't think to start it or spark it, but I thought it was a really interesting event. So I enjoyed it. I think I'm going to go to the next one.
So the final question I'm going to ask you, and the final question of the night, which I've been asking everyone when they've been in here, coming into this room, had you decided on someone in particular?
Coming into this room, I decided, the issue is my home constituency in London, I'd vote Tory always. And I was kind of thinking of voting Green here, but just because some of his policies are a bit ludicrous in my opinion and they don't actually tackle the core issues that I thought he did and would, I'd still vote Tory in Southampton as well.
So obviously the hustings and the debate has changed your opinion tonight then?
Yeah, completely. Surprisingly.
Good. Well, we're doing good things here in the Garden Court. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Charlotte, and the rest of the audience for coming here tonight. The candidates battled out many issues, including the NHS, immigration, schooling, and most importantly, student issues such as student housing and tuition fees. Hopefully, for those of you watching at home, that was tackled. Thank you for joining me for the analysis and live reaction with the audience. And we hope to see you next week when we have a live debate for the Romsey constituency next time. Thank you very much.
Can I say, can I do? I live my life for loving you. What can I do? Can I say? Ain't nobody else gonna make me feel this way. What can I say? Can I do? What can I do? I live my life for loving you. Yeah. What can I do? Can I say? Oh, yeah, yeah. Ain't nobody else gonna make me feel this way. Nobody else. what you do.